Good afternoon. Welcome to the February 2nd meeting of the Mobile Planning Commission. I'd like to take a moment to review our general operating procedures. Our meeting is divided into two sessions, the public hearing session and the deliberation session. In the public hearing session, an application or group application on the agenda is called. The applicant makes his or her presentation. Commission members ask questions, if any. Members of the public make their comments. Only 4 people may speak for an agenda item, project, and 4 against. Each speaker is limited to 5 minutes, subject to questions by the commissioners. After 4 minutes, a loud beep will indicate 1 minute left to speak. At this point, please summarize your comments. After all opposition speakers have finished, the applicant will be given time to respond. If you do intend to speak, please come to the podium, speak into the microphone, and give your name and address for our minutes. Please direct all comments to the commission only and not to the applicant or the audience. Please remember to speak directly into the microphone. On routine applications, the applicant may simply raise his or her hand if there are no objections to the staff recommendations. I will then announce that the applicant is in full agreement with those recommendations. If there are any questions, the applicant will be given an opportunity to respond. After hearing all applications, the commission will go into deliberation session. In the deliberation session, the commissioners discuss each application with input from the staff as necessary, but with no input from the audience. The commissioners then vote on each application, and results of the voting can be learned from the planning department at 205-5895. If some issues arise in the deliberation of session that were not addressed in the public hearing, the chairman has discretion either to allow additional comments pertaining to those issues in order to resolve them, or call for the application to be held over for discussion at a future meeting. Occasionally, one or more commission members may recuse themselves from discussing and voting on a given application. A recusal does not necessarily mean that the member is directly involved with the application or the applicant. Depending upon the circumstances, ethical rules may require a recusal when there is only the slightest appearance of a conflict of interest. If a regular member recuses, a supernumerary will vote in their stead unless both supernumeraries are already voting due to absences. The Planning Commission makes final decisions subject to appeal on subdivisions, planning approvals, plan unit developments. The Planning Commission only makes recommendations on zoning applications, with the City Council making the final decisions. At this time, please turn off all cell phones. Commissioners and staff, please remember to turn on your microphones when speaking. We'll have roll call. Jay Stubbs, Alan Cameron here, Jennifer Denson, Carlos Gant, Shirley Sessions.
Here.
Taylor Atchison.
Here.
Matt Anderson. Nick Amberger.
Here.
Scott Jones. Susan Carley. Kirk Matei.
Here.
Okay. So we'll move on to application number 1.
Mr. Chairman, adoption of the agenda, please. We need a motion and a second.
Second.
Thank you.
All in favor?
Aye.
All against? Motion passes. Okay, at this time we'll open the deliberation session. Item number 1, Bradley Estate subdivision is with a waiver of section VD9. The subdivision is recommended for tentative approval, subject to 7 conditions. Is the applicant present? Are you good with the staff report? Applicant's present and is good with all recommendations by the staff. Is anyone here to speak against? Okay, we'll move on to application number 2. Circle Court Drive Landing Subdivision. This application is recommended for tentative approval with 13 conditions. Is the applicant present?
Traffic, where was the cul-de-sac suggested?
That requirement did not come from the traffic engineering department. Check with planning.
Oh.
Nobody else. Okay. We've done a little bit of research. This property was subdivided back in 1995. It included these 2 lots and then a piece of another lot. So it was a 3-lot subdivision. The 3rd lot is no longer involved. One of the conditions of that 1995 subdivision was that this, and if you notice the funky configuration to accommodate a cul-de-sac, was that the cul-de-sac be constructed. I can't tell you how, but this here, which is the easement Mr. Luker is referring to, that was city right-of-way and was vacated and then incorporated into the private property, which would have been probably the impetus for requiring the construction of the cul-de-sac.
Was it vacated all the way around that lot or just that one section?
Just this section that is within the property.
So you basically can't have it both ways. It can't be your lot and a public road. I mean, that's effectively, I think that's effectively what you're saying. People continue to use it. It's effectively still a public road, garbage trucks. I mean, I think you've either got to build the cul-de-sac as suggested by the staff, or you've got to carve out a right-of-way where those 2 lots are separated, and that road is effectively back to city right-of-way.
Did the city just take it back like that?
Well, the only reason we did a little bit of research, but Mr. Luker brought this up yesterday afternoon, early this morning, so I can't tell you what happened. I can tell you that in 95, you had a 3-lot subdivision. The 3rd lot's a legal lot of record, no longer participating. And in so doing, this right-of-way was vacated and the condition of the cul-de-sac construction was placed on the approval. So what I really can't answer at this point is, how did the plat get recorded without the cul-de-sac being built?
So especially
Because it
it should have been built back in 95.
Exactly, because it goes back to what Mr. Amberger's saying. You know, you have a strip through here that's supposed to be a utility easement that's basically functioning as a roadway going through the property. But I don't know that, you know, legally, I think at this point, you know, they could put barricades here and here. It's private property. If, you know, a utility company needs to come and do maintenance, they can, but the average citizen, city garbage truck, et cetera, doesn't have a legal right to traverse across.
Nick's point, now that they're trying to get 2 lots, they may be willing to take that street out if the city would consider taking it.
The one thing just want to clarify is, you have 2 lots here. All they're doing is shifting an existing property line. It's the same number of lots they have now.
I thought they were mislabeled. Okay.
They are mislabeled because you cannot create 2 lot ones, but the end result is they have 2 lots. It'll stay 2 lots, but they're common property lines being shifted.
You know, I think the staff's point, you know, if that property owner went out there on the northern lot 1 and barricaded it, said, look, you can't drive down this. Now, emergency vehicles, any type of vehicle has to go down there, and there's not a place for them to turn around. It wouldn't meet the fire. What's like 100 feet is the maximum length the road can be without a turnaround, maybe 150. It's not much.
Yeah.
I get it. But if I buy the lot from him and barricade it, that's intentions don't.
Can you not run an access easement with the record an access easement on the deed?
I don't think you can have a public access easement for just anybody to go down. Usually those easements are dedicated or not dedicated. Usually those easements are placed for a specific purpose. You know, otherwise you have a right of way.
Yeah, it's. I mean, I know it to be a substandard road, and even if you had to construct a cul-de-sac, it probably would be. It couldn't be curb and gutter and all those things. It's just not. It's just not that. I mean, we would work with him on that, but I think it's got to be one or the other. There's either got to be a cul-de-sac, you know, or it's got to be a city right of way through there. It's really up to him.
All right. The one thing I would suggest is, unless the commission has a clear-cut idea of what they want to do at this point, staff would like to suggest a holdover to the first meeting in March to allow us to do some additional research. I just don't think, based on what's on the February 15th agenda, we're going to have enough time to provide all of the information that's going to be needed for the commission to make a decision. I know that's a month, but okay.
Did the applicant have that option redrawn of showing that right-of-way going back to the city?
Yeah.
Just to be prepared if that was
Yes.
a path we could go down?
Okay, so Mr. Luker, could you also prepare another tentative plat that would show that as right-of-way and send it to us? I think in terms of the width, that's what it'd have to be, even if the paved area remained the same.
That'll eliminate a lot of future problems for him or anybody else that might. ever own that property if it's that. Well,
Is anyone else here to speak for item number 2? Anyone to speak against? We move on to number 3, which is a subdivision and zoning application. The subdivision is to approve and create one legal lot of record from one meets and bounds parcel, and then the zoning is to rezone from R1 to B3. Is the applicant, this application, the subdivision is recommended for approval, I think.
Yes, sir. The subdivision's recommended for approval. The zoning is not.
Right, right. Okay, is the applicant present? Yeah. Speak, can you get a little closer to the microphone?
Sorry, Todd Dempsey, 143 Myrtlewood Lane. My apologies. There's 2 up here. I don't know which one. I didn't know which one to talk into. I'm fine with the subdivision tentative approval items are all fine. Okay, so if we're done with that, I'll go to rezoning. So if you look at the map up there, I'd like to provide some context to this just for everybody so they understand the back history of this. So the lot in question is 908 Kendrick Drive, which you see marked up there in sight. And directly in front of it in yellow is the Hardee's that's on Moffett Road. And directly behind it is a railroad track. And directly to the west, what would be sort of the west of the left of that, is about 6 different lots that are zoned R1. There are 3 houses on those 6 lots. There's some empty ones in between them. 2 of them are owner occupied, and 1 is owned by a trust and has a tenant living in it. Both of the owner-occupied houses are in support of the rezoning. I've got a signed letter by one of the neighbors. Both of them are elderly and did not want to drive down here to speak today, but they did want me to convey their support. So one signed a letter, asked me to write a letter. Both of them are not very handy with computers, I'll just say that. So they asked if I would type the letter and then bring it to them to sign. So Mrs. Stone, Judith Stone, who lives across the street, and Mr. Joe Dean are the 2 owner occupants of the homes that are in support of this. The other tenant we did not talk to. He has a locked fence and dogs barking on his property. Did not want us on. And then to the south, there are no trespassing signs on the Romer property, or excuse me, to the east, that would be. So we did not try and go up their street without them wanting us to. So for some color on this, just so everybody understands, the Hardee's parcel and this parcel were actually one lot back in the 80s, and the owner of that lot subdivided and rezoned the front to allow Hardee's to be there. Unfortunately, he forgot to fix the plat for the remaining land in the rear that makes up this parcel, and he forgot to zone it something other than R1. He ended up not being successful in doing anything with it, sold it. It was sold again. I've talked to 2 of the prior owners, and no one can make anything happen or do anything with it residentially due to its zoning. So all 3 owners going back to the 80s have been unsuccessful in improving the lot. No builder will build a spec house there, and they can't find any tenants to build for that would want to live in between this Hardee's and the train track. So as a result, today we're submitting 2 applications. One is to fix that legal lot issue that he did not correct in the 80s, and the other is to rezone it to a more suitable use. I have a contract to purchase it. I don't own the lot right now. And my contract is obviously contingent on the rezoning because I personally don't think it's a residential use either. The property, I submitted some pictures, which I don't know if you guys have them, but the property has become blight on the area. Mr. Dean and Ms. Stone across the street, like I said, are in support of this. It's become a public trash dump, which they're very unhappy about, and they want it cleaned up. Additionally, across the railroad tracks, if anybody here ever goes to McCoy's Outdoors, you may have seen it, but there unfortunately is a homeless encampment behind McCoy's that's across in these woods, and the two neighbors have found people sleeping on their property. They found people, one of them was in a car. Ms. Stone doesn't feel safe, she said, with them coming through the property, and they're coming up from that area that's marked AE, sort of behind you on that map that the Shriners own, and they're coming across the street and going to the motels over there. She informed me, and she informed Ms. Gregory, councilwoman whose district this is in, that they're going through there and then going to eat at the hotels, breakfast bars, and bathing in the pools. And it's unfortunate they're stopping at Ms. Stone's house on the way sometimes to fall asleep in her yard. Anyways, so that's a little bit of the history. Our use is for a boat storage facility. It's not obnoxious in our smell or activity, and it's very quiet. We will clean it up. We'll also fence the entire parcel, which should stop the homeless people from going through. On Monday, I was out there, and Miss Gregory drove by and actually was able to talk to Miss Stone for about 20 minutes and hear directly from her desire to have this rezoned and cleaned up also, so she doesn't have to look at the trash and the people coming through her yard. So I know there's some items on here that staff has recommended for denial. I'm happy to discuss those with you guys or answer any questions you have, but this property's been sitting here from, as far as I can tell, the 60s or 50s with nothing on it, and it's going to continue to probably sit there with nothing on it because the zoning is not compatible for the use of what you can actually do with it, according to multiple people that have owned it almost over 60 years.
Have you provided those signed letters to the staff?
I have them here, and here's Ms. Stone's letter. Mr. Dean is older. He asked me that I type this. I presented the letter to him, and he said something along the lines of, my handwriting's not great, just give him the letter. So I didn't want to push him on that, but they're kind of the same version of the same letter, just a stock, I support the rezoning, please, convey that to the staff. So, and if anybody has any questions about that, y'all can talk to Ms. Gregory, because she did in fact meet with one of the two people and spoke to them for about 15 minutes.
Do you have any more specifics about the existing road? I mean, obviously that's one of the comments.
Yeah, I do, Nick. I went out and measured it. So I know one of the issues that staff is concerned about is substandard road. I've got a few points on that. I understand that it's obviously not built to today's standards. We live in a 300-year-old city. All of our roads are not going to be current standards. One, two, it's a little bit of a misnomer in this situation regarding a commercial zoning with commercial traffic. Normally when people think of that, they think of delivery trucks, 18-wheelers, things like that. The bays that we're designing are not big enough to hold any type of commercial vessel or anything like that. So it's residential trucks that would be pulling a Stouter or Boston Whaler or a 20-foot center console behind them. And Mr. Dean, who lives across the street on the north, actually has a tow truck. He pulls cars up and down it all the time. I asked him if he had a problem ever pulling his cars down and passing another vehicle. He said no. I went and measured the road itself. There are parts that are 18 feet wide, which are obviously not as wide as his code is, but there are parts that are over 24 feet wide. And that is back by his house, because I actually laid a tape on the asphalt and went and measured it. And just to double check, I went to some nearby roads to test their widths to see how this lined up with other roads in the area that have commercial zoning. So across Moffett and directly to the northwest is one example, Stimpson Lane, which is zoned by all commercial. You can see it right up there. If you look directly across Moffett and go left, it's all red zoning right there, and then there's kind of light purple stuff behind it. That cut-through road that goes back through there, at some points, that is only 16 feet wide, and then at other points, it's 24 feet wide. So it's not, I guess, unusual in this part of town to have some older roads that aren't completely up to today's standards. But like I said, there will be no 18-wheelers going down this. This is a pickup truck that everybody sees on the streets. And the bay storage size itself actually prevents anything like a 40-foot Freeman, if you're familiar with that style boat that's 12 feet wide and has to have special markers on the trailers. Those can't even fit in these bays, so they wouldn't be there.
Not asking you to do engineering analysis on the spot here, but in your opinion, what you saw out there, is it reasonably practical to get a 20-foot road through there from all the way from Moffett to the end? I mean,
Is it reasonably by,
I mean,
by
does it
construction standards
yeah,
or
does it-
financial standards?
by
That's two
construction
different
standards,
questions.
yes.
From,
Because this body's not taking up any financial
yeah,
standards. We have to look at
so,
the engineering
yes,
and-
it's flat on both sides. I mean, there's enough space. All the stuff to the north is just flat
but my
dirt
question is,
right off the side of it.
where it's 18 feet wide, is it potentially that, whatever that strip is it potentially adding 2 feet? Is that, or does it look
Yeah,
like it's
there's
reasonably
there's
that to
no
be?
obstacles, there's no water main pop-ups or anything like that. But I'll just, for the record, note that this project is not big enough for, just for history's sake. I've done about 80-something real estate development projects, so I have a pretty good grasp on pricing and things. And this is not a very big project, and so any cost of widening the road would just make this project cost prohibitive, and I would have to drop the contract on the land because it's just not there.
This isn't going to answer your question, but it's information for you. To this point, you have 37.5 feet of right-of-way, and that's what you're stuck with. So whether or not a street that you're envisioning can fit in there, the question is, can what you envision fit in 37.5 feet? Because that's all you have to this point.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I was trying to ask Mr. Dims, because I just don't know if we have a way around the 20 foot. If it's not 20 foot, it's not 20 foot. I don't know if we have any way or latitude with saying you can't do some improvement to the road. Now, how far and what that improvement is, I mean, obviously, we have to work with different standards or different situations that work in the city. Typically, it would be a full-blown curb and gutter and underground drainage systems, and would be probably cost more than your development would
That would be a
cost.
nice road.
But the reality is that there might be some things that we could work with. That sheer width to get a fire truck down there, I just don't know that we. Tell me, do we have any latitude from a planning and zoning standpoint on the 20 foot road? I mean, I just don't know that we do.
Yeah, I mean, the fire trucks go down it now. I did ask Miss Stone that, and she said, yes, they've actually been down there to go to the Hardys one time, and they went down that road. I, on purpose, drove my car with another car on the road to make sure I could get by, and I could.
Are
And
there fire
so,
hydrants and such down there? Because I mean, again, they've got other comments about fire hydrants required to be within 400 feet of non-sprinkler. commercial
yeah,
buildings.
and that's fine. Most of my projects I've done, if we're doing something in an area like this, we've had to put in a fire hydrant if there wasn't one
And
within.
the point is, there is some infrastructure you're probably going to have to do. I just want you to be aware of that one way or the other. So, I just, me personally, I don't see any way around some improvements to get that road to a consistent 20 feet. I think we could work with you. The road probably has enough topography where it's not full-blown curb and gutter and underground drainage and stuff like that. But I mean, I can't tell you what that is today. But
Is there a,
No, I understand, but just for my answer back to you guys, if that was a condition, I would drop this. I mean, I can't, it doesn't work pen to paper. So,
I get it.
so the option is, we can leave it as is a trash dump with homeless people going there. It's been 60 years. Nobody's doing anything with this. It's probably not going to have anything happen to it. Or we can rezone it, make it a usable use, and the neighbors are happy, add some tax revenue to the
Understand
city.
conundrum, but I don't think this body routinely does things that are in direct conflict with the fire code, and that's the struggle I think we have.
Well, if you're asking about fire code, in short, this body cannot waive it.
Exactly.
right, but we could do it just like we would leave the fire code comments in there and could suggest the rezoning, and that's taken up when Mr. Dempsey submits his plans.
I think what we're hearing from Mr. Dempsey is he just
As long as we require the dedication.
what I'm hearing him say is if he's got to spend $1 on infrastructure improvements.
No, that's not what I'm saying. Sorry if I
That's what I was,
conveyed that. What I was saying was putting a fire hydrant in on an existing water line is a different cost deal in a situation pricing versus having to go and repave multiple hundreds of feet of a new road and put in curb and gutter and widen it and do all that. Because from obviously my point of view, the road is suitable for this use right now as is. So the only thing we've got to do, which is the fire department comment to make sure that we've got a fire hydrant in there, that's okay. But what doesn't work from this standpoint is actually taking this road, either new asphalt, curb and gutter, utilities on it, anything like that. I mean, that would be in the hundreds of thousands of dollars.
But I just have I know you are talking over there, but I guess my thought process is I understand this piece of land seems kind of stuck. You know, it was kind of left as part of a subdivision. As this body, is there a way we can do our part to activate the land and push it up to city council and let the developer sit in the room with the fire department? Because there are negotiations to be had with the fire department. There could be a sprinkler in the building, or adding a fire hydrant out by the front of the street may fit within the ranges that the fire department finds acceptable. I don't want to negotiate on part of the fire department.
Okay, a couple of clarifications. I just want to make sure the applicant and the commission and staff are working off the same sheet of music. First of all, the fire department comments, I just want to make sure the applicant understands they're including the access road with an approved turnaround in their comments
Where are you seeing that? Because
in the
the
staff report.
copy I've got is just saying fire access is required to be within 150 feet of all residential buildings.
Which brings me, and let me let him read. I'll hush.
Yeah, so my comment would be the same. You know, the fire hydrant's not a problem. I'd like to talk to the fire department about that, because if they're already accessing the road and it's a 2-foot difference on some parts but not all of it, I'd like to have a discussion with them on that.
Yeah, I get it, but I mean, they just, you know, they don't play fire codes. I mean, and when,
And I'm not
when,
asking-
and when something is new, unfortunately, that's when it's required to be brought up to the standard. So
Yeah.
I suspect this body wants to try to figure out a way to say yes, but you got to understand personal opinions about things versus codes. Those two worlds collide, and they just don't fit.
Yeah, and I'm happy to meet with them, because it's, you know, there are areas of that road that are 24 feet wide right now. There are some areas that are 18, so possibly it's just widening the areas that are 18 to 20 feet.
Right. Then that's kind of where I was trying to go with you. Perhaps that's something that you need to look at, you know, with your engineer, maybe put a rough dollar figure on it to see what that is, because you might have a scenario where, you know, the real improvement is from the northern part of your lot out to Moffett, and you have maybe a little different configuration of what you've got, but it's not taking you all the way down the road. It's just taking you to the top corner of your lot. So
The problem is continuing, they're going to want a turnaround.
yeah, I'd say
But
as he's doing it now, he's owning it from Moffett all the way down to the end of the road. He might have a scenario where he could own it just there.
and build the turnaround
lesser
at the
piece.
Well, most of
northern
the stuff
portion.
past the site is wider than 20 feet.
I get that.
Yeah.
It's the piece getting to you. I mean, it's, you know, it's
But
And
Whatever
actually,
it-
the not that it matters or does, but the part that was 18 feet is actually the curb cut up on the road.
yeah,
So that's just cutting out the
Yeah.
curb cut.
so you'd realistically have to probably widen that and widen at least. I mean, I suspect the least amount you could end up to is from Moffett widening the curb cut to the northern edge of your property. That's probably where you end up with the least amount of.
Yeah,
So
but there's parts, no, I understand what you're saying. I was just letting you know, I measured multiple parts of that road. So there are parts in between my parcel, or the parcel I've got under contract, and the Moffett that are wider than 20 feet also.
Yeah.
So it's not
It's a
fixed
hodgepodge.
width.
I think we
Yeah,
recognize that. I mean,
it's an old road.
Okay. To clarify, I think what Mr. Atchison is saying, if the commission chose to move forward with recommending approval, that would not waive the fire department requirements. That's still a discussion for y'all to have. So just to
Then
clarify.
potentially the developer could have a meeting with the fire department waiting on rezoning, just to understand that
Anytime.
question better.
Yes.
You know,
Yeah.
because it's still got to go to city council. It's just, I know how arduous this rezoning process is,
Yeah.
time-wise. And
The plat just doesn't get signed though until improvements are made.
Um,
That's the heavy lift.
The other thing I want to point out, and I want to make sure the applicant is reading the staff report with the recommendation. The staff recommended on the subdivision, and it didn't print on your recommendations agenda in front of you, so he doesn't have it, but we're recommending dedication of the right-of-way along Kendrick Drive. So I want to make sure the applicant is aware of that and can speak to that now, and that is not a surprise or news to you.
Yeah, I'd have to look at a survey to see how much off of that existing road that would be. Do you have that measurement?
I want to say that's going to be either 12 and a half or 17 and a half feet
Okay.
more than additional, because Kendrick Drive is 37 and a half feet of right-of-way now. We're trying to get it at least along this lot's frontage to 60 feet because it's not curb and gutter. All of the other right-of-way came from the other side of the street. Hold on, I'm having to do math for you.
No, that's fine. I have a question. Is that, no, well, which one do you want first, question or math?
It seems like the original, the problem with access to this property came when that original owner that built the Hardys carved off the back lot and didn't dedicate enough property along Hendrick Drive, so now you're stuck with that
Well, yeah,
37-foot
I don't think he
strip.
did anything after he subdivided the
That's
front.
just, that's what's got you so switched in there.
Yeah.
Okay. The mathematical answer is 17 and a half feet of right-of-way. Yes. No,
So,
no.
yeah.
17 and
30
a half
center line.
feet additional. There's already 12 and a half from center line.
30.
What- What happened back in 83, Morris's owned all of this property, as well as this property here and these properties here. Their attorney represented them at the Planning Commission when they had a contract for Hardee's here. The attorney was very specific. They were only concerned about this piece of property and that they didn't foresee a use for this property. Kendrick Drive, at that time, which I believe, and it's in your staff report, it was in 1983. Kendrick Drive had been developed in 1948. The subregs at that time allowed for half streets. So all of this on Kendrick Drive was allowed with the platting of a half street, which was 25 feet of right-of-way. When this came before the Planning Commission, the Morrises only wanted to give half of the other half of the right-of-way that was needed for Kendrick Drive. You had 25 feet. You needed 25 for the other side. They only gave 12.5. But the commission did require that they give the 12.5 for the entire length of this property. So right now recorded is a funky looking plat that has this as one lot, dedicating 12 and a half feet along Kendrick Drive, and then this sliver that dedicated 12 and a half feet along this property that doesn't show it as a lot, which is why it's also here for a subdivision. So there's still not enough right-of-way for a city standard street, which is why staff is requesting, since this street is not curb and gutter, that there be 30 feet from what is the true center line of the street. So at least along this portion of property, you have an adequate width. And that equals 17.5.
That was a good answer.
Not short.
So we don't have I don't have a problem with that if we could reduce some of that 25-foot buffer down then, because eating that off of if you take that off 17 additional feet off the front property line, which is what you're saying, right?
You mean the setback?
Yeah, saying probably, can we make that up in
Yeah.
a setback maybe?
Yeah, because
I see.
it's all a math game with this because it's long and narrow. And
Yeah.
so to get an actual pickup truck with a boat behind it, you need roughly around 80 feet to line up direct so you can back into your bay with it.
Mhm.
And so the bays also have to be a certain depth just to fit a basic boat with a tongue and a trailer on it and things like that. And so the 25 feet, we're going to put up an opaque fence that you can't see through anyways and landscape all that. So I don't really have a problem with that if we can reduce down that 25-foot requirement. We'll still have a fence there. We'll still have nice landscaping outside of it to give it to you. But I don't want to be on the hook to pave it or anything like that, because that, again, is going to make the project cost prohibitive. And the road and that, I know for a fact right across to the, if you're looking at the second home on the street, which is Mr. Dean's home, right to what would be the southwest of that. Yeah, right where your marker is. I've measured in there, and somewhere in there where I measured is over 24 feet of asphalt. So the road is 24 feet wide in those parts of it also.
It's the upper part, the northern part is what's 18.
There are parts of the northern part that are over 18. There are parts that are 20-something, but the curb cut actually at the street was 18 feet from curb to curb. But, my first job out of college, I built houses in Texas, and we did curb cuts every time. You just get the guy out there to cut it. It's not a huge issue. So I know it's not a perfect box to check, but we'd like the chance to try and improve this.
Setback would only affect that last storage bay, right? I mean, if you remove just on the top part, you would still have the same circulation. It's just, well, I guess you'd have to back your fence up as well, wouldn't you?
Well, that's why I was just saying that, because we're going to put a fence up there in landscaping, so it's going to be sort of 25 feet of dead space, honestly, because we would put the fence on the outside of the property line anyways. So from the naked eye from the road, you're still going to see a fence. You just have a cut down green space within the lot. And that's really what the neighbors are concerned about when I talk to them. They just don't want the trash there and want something suitable to look at.
I do think you need to consult with your engineer though, and get some idea of what widening the curb cut at Moffett would be, and then work with George and myself on what a widening might look like through there. I don't think it's as evasive as what you might think. I mean,
Do what now?
Work with George and I on what a widening might look like, to your property, to where we could get it a minimum of a 20-foot consistent, if it gets wider than 20 feet, great, but where it's 18, a little two foot widening, work with us on what the typical section of that roadway might look like for you. I don't think it's probably what you're thinking. It's probably not curb and gutter. It's probably something lesser, because it just won't curb and gutter won't fit. But I do think you have to, from my perspective, there's got to be 20 feet from Moffett, at least to the northern end of your site. And then you might want to think about looking at your site in some other way if you don't want to take it all the way down to the end of the road.
Yeah.
You at least got to put a dollar figure on it. I know it's not hundreds of thousands of dollars. I can tell you that.
No, the whole road would be that, but
It's not even that much. Looking at just the paving, I'm just going to be rough with you on a number. It's maybe $20,000-$25,000 just for the asphalt stuff. So it's not
no,
not as evasive as what you
just
think it is.
I built a financial model on it. I know how thin it is.
I get it. I get it.
And that's probably honestly why a lot of people hadn't stood in front of y'all to try and do something with it, because it is a square peg in a round hole to make this work. But, you know, I would, since you guys are a recommending body, I would like to move forward with this if possible, and meet with the fire department on this and keep the ball going forward on this.
Quick question for you. If they're staff suggesting 30 feet from center line dedication and a 25-foot building setback, and you're saying you may need to ask for a lesser setback, we wouldn't want to go ahead and approve the subdivision and lock that in. Would we hold the subdivision and approve the rezoning so it can move forward to city council, and he could have time to meet with his engineer to study those numbers?
From staff's perspective, I'm seeing a lot. I saw initially a lot of issues, and I'm seeing more. The property itself, you know, when you go back and you read the minutes back in 1983, you had a commission that's trying, and a commission ultimately that made the decision on the rezoning, that's trying to work with the applicant, you know, to get a project through. And one of the things we and this applicant are grappling with now is that decision where there's just not enough right-of-way getting to this site. That's a decision made in 1983 that's impacting property and people right now.
Yeah.
So you've got that. You're not, the only way there's going to be more right-of-way north of this site is through some sort of condemnation process. You have this property before you now for B3. While the proposed use may be one that's not a, you know, that the neighbors are supportive of, and that use may be there wonderfully for 10 years. Once it's B3, it's B3. And anything allowed in a B3 district can go here. I understand the applicant's concern, while he may be able to dedicate the additional right-of-way along Kendrick, the setback from that point would then cause him issues with turnarounds and accessing his site. This commission can only either require the dedication of right-of-way or not. If you require the dedication and then he can't get this to work, he's either abandoning the project or going to the Board of Adjustment, because only the Board of Adjustment is going to be able to waive that setback requirement. This may also be something that could be a use variance as well, and considered by the board, considering all of these unique factors associated with this property. Because it's not just, he's correct, this isn't the only property that's sitting on a substandard street in the city of Mobile, not by any means. But the constraints you have getting to the property, the fact it's a dead-end street, it's the only way you can get to the property, and then you have a railroad track and wetlands and a creek behind you, those are all, you add them all together, there's some uniqueness there.
Would the use variance help and not trigger, does the use variance not trigger some of the items that rezoning triggers?
No, he would still have to fully comply, and let me paint no rosy, I'm not painting a rosy picture, because he would still have to comply with the fire department's requirements. But what it could do is still allow the dedication, potentially have them consider the setback issue, and then the issue of use, so that it's not B3 with all B3 uses. It's still zoned R1, but you can have boat and RV storage here.
I mean, I don't have a problem. I prefer not to, obviously, with these projects, but I don't have a problem with a restriction to just this use. I mean, I don't have any plans to flip this and sell it. I mean, my stuff's going in there. That's part of the reason I'm doing the project. But she's exactly right. I mean, it's just a weird site, for lack of a better term, and it's not going to be perfect, and that's why it's been sitting blank for 60 years. And so, you know.
So, quick question for Margaret. If it stayed R1 and someone came in to subdivide 3 lots, a lot of these fire access issues would still be similar?
I really can't answer that. I would have to defer to the fire department, especially since they've adopted a new code. I think you would have some concerns, but the concerns I would think for residential for 3 new houses would be different from a commercial building.
We dealt with similar ones like this kind of in Pinehurst, where there was hodgepodges of streets and pieces and parts of streets, and then sections of land where there was 50-foot lots across the street and then 300-foot lots. And what we did is we tried to make them bring that road up to that standard that existed on the we tried to get the road as consistent as we could be, you know, to be, if only half of the road was built, we tried to get them to get the rest of it consistently. So at least it wasn't a complete hodgepodge, half a dirt road and then half a road with curb and gutter. So we tried to find a balance, and that's what I was trying to say to Mr. Dempsey. I think we can work with him because the rest of the road's not curb and gutter to not take it to that full-blown curb and gutter, underground drainage. So it is a lesser standard in terms of the infrastructure that's got to be built. But I can't get beyond that 20 feet because I don't think the fire department would let things get beyond the. No. I mean, we've just dealt with that on so many other situations, dealing with it on quite a feet right now where there's just that piece, there's no room for wiggle. But how you get to 20 feet, if you've already got 18 foot of pavement out there, 2 foot of pavement on one side of that road is not that much of an effort. I mean,
No, it's not. And that's a different conversation than bringing the entire road up to standards because, I mean, you know, you've developed your subdivision that you did in our neighborhood.
20-foot road.
Yeah, and so, you know, it's one thing to force the developer for a project like this. You know, again, this isn't a new project where you expect to do everything 100% brand new. I mean, this is a Band-Aid on an old road, on an old project. I mean, an old subdivision, like she said, that was, for lack of a better term, not done right in 1983. And so we're left to operate within the parameters of what's there.
I might suggest you request a holdover until maybe the next meeting to have some of those conversations with the engineering department and perhaps the fire department as well.
But what is that going to really accomplish? Because even if y'all end up rezoning this a month from now, he still has the setback issue, which is going to take it to the Board of Adjustment. So I think Margaret's suggestion I'm not saying deny this. I think it's a very good project for this site. But to make everything fit, it might be best that he get a use variance and a setback variance. The road issues, right-of-way issues are taken care of, and his construction issues are taken care of because of a reduced setback he can get from Board of Adjustment. Y'all approve it, he's still dead in the water.
But it still takes him on a path to city council to make sure whether or not he's going to get shut down there and it's dead anyway.
Yeah, I mean.
If it goes to, what would go to the council?
Rezoning.
Okay.
I'm saying we could approve the subdivision, but knowing that if he wants to reduce setback, he's got to get on top of that Board of Adjustment for the reduced setback. But we know the zoning's got to go to city council, and we know to record his plat, he'd have to hit all these marks unless he gets them changed in another.
I would suggest, rather than pursuing the rezoning, yes, he's still going to have all the access issues. But instead of pursuing the rezoning, he go entirely from the land use standpoint to the Board of Adjustment for both the use and the setbacks.
So in 20 years from now,
I understand what you're saying.
Yeah,
But why was that?
What is the setback issue?
If he dedicates
25, so it's 30 feet from the center line in the dedication, then it's a 25-foot setback. Is that,
Yeah, so that's what I was saying. So if you're gonna require additional 17.5, I think is what you said, for me to give up off the Kendrick Drive property line, and then you're still gonna require a 25-foot setback, you're compressing the site, you're making it
There's
more
not-
narrow, and you have to have a certain amount of depth. This isn't the first project like this I've done,
yeah,
so
but the,
I know.
but the configuration is what Taylor was saying, was just that one, you're potentially giving up one.
You'd have to back up your fence too, keep it on your property unless.
Yeah,
you got a
so
right of way.
if you're giving 17.5 up and then I still have to do 25 feet, it's gonna compress the parking pad.
Yeah.
That's where I would lose it.
The
'cause
whole way down,
and so you don't then have, ideally.
Does the
'cause there's no-
setback apply to the parking pad though? I thought
No, but
it's
what
just the
he's,
building.
but what he's saying is, and I can best point up here. You've
Unless
got
I
this-
can pave in it. Sorry.
Okay, you have you have Kendrick Drive. That's the existing right-of-way with a setback of 25 feet from that existing right-of-way, and his fence is right on the property line. So if he moves that fence back 17 and a half feet out of the right-of-way, and then, so that further compresses by at least 17 and a half feet his turning area in here. Then you lose at least one bay here as well due to the setback.
Margaret, is that drawing reasonably to scale?
that's-
Or do you have a drawing that shows all of those things in that built environment where it's all to scale? I mean, the
I
building.
think I submitted a site plan that was to scale.
That's,
He
survey,
submitted this
George?
site plan. Hold on.
Mhm.
I'm just curious, that width of your turnaround pad, how much is that?
It's 80
How much do you need?
80 feet.
You need 80, and we think it's drawn at 80?
I mean, the other option is to put grass there and let people drive on top of it, but I was trying to
Okay.
keep it to where it looked
All right.
nice.
This dimension from here to here
Yeah.
is 80 feet
Okay.
right now.
Gotcha.
And having maneuvered trucks with trailers, you need all that.
But that drawing, though, reflects how it would be with all the dedication, so,
No, it's
No,
not.
oh, it
That's
does not, okay, so.
That is
okay.
existing.
You gotta move that setback 17 and a half feet.
Correct.
I'm with you, okay. Now I understand.
And if it ate up into that landscaping planning area, you'd need a reduction allowance for that.
Yeah, and it looks like these bays are 15 feet wide, so
That's correct.
One bay
you're
would
losing
almost do
two
it.
bays.
Well.
The other thing is the fence, and if it's not chain link, you're looking at a fence variance. And it's shown as 3 feet in the setback, but that's probably not what you're really going to want.
Yeah, it's just conceptual.
I just, from a planning perspective, I continue to see variances.
Does the, in our changes that have been adopted, he would still go to city council with the use variance?
No,
I thought that was a new,
no. Variances by law, any change of enforcement of any element of the zoning ordinance on a piece of property, use, site development, etc., any change to those requirements require variance, and that is all under the jurisdiction of the Board of Zoning Adjustment. And any appeal from the board goes to circuit court. That's everywhere in the state of Alabama.
Can we maybe close the public hearing portion and go into deliberation? I mean, we're going in circles now, not to set you up, Todd, but we're just going in circles now. We've repeated everything 20 times.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. Last thing I would say is, again, I know it's a square peg in a round hole, but what Taylor suggested is something that is more palatable because I do have a contract and a timeline on this, and to be able to keep the ball moving forward would allow me to meet with, address the road thing, but still keep going towards city council since they're the original or final decision maker, and you guys are the, I guess the word's recommending body to them. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dempsey. Is there anyone else here to speak for item number 3? Anyone to speak against? That will conclude the business portion of the meeting, and we will now adjourn to the deliberation portion. Move to item number 1, Bradley Estate subdivision, which is recommended for tentative approval subject to 7 conditions. Do I have a motion?
Move to approve based on staff recommendations.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. Item number 2, Circle Court Drive Landing subdivision, recommended for tentative approval.
Mr. Chairman, staff would recommend, and I believe the applicant was agreeable on a holdover of this application to the March 2nd meeting.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Motion to hold over and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Second. All opposed? Motion passes. Item number 3, 908 Kendrick Drive subdivision. This is a subdivision application and a zoning application. Let's take the subdivision first. Subdivision is recommended for approval. Applicant is good with all conditions. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion
Okay.
and
I just want to clarify, is that with the dedication? The only reason I say that is it was in the staff report, but not on the agenda.
Yeah, it's in the body of the report. It's just not on the, in the numbers.
I just want
Yeah,
to make sure.
Including the 30-foot from center line.
Yes, sir.
dedication.
Move to approve subject to staff recommendation.
Thank you.
are we clear on the motion? We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. Same separate application for 908 Kendrick Drive. Motion to rezone, application to rezone from R1 to R3. It is recommended for denial.
I'm going to make a motion to approve the rezoning and commenting that the developer needs to meet with fire department and engineering to address the issues in the rezoning and the subdivision recommendations to make sure that this is a viable project.
Yeah, I'll second that and add, I guess our reasons would be a change in the area and a need for the rezoning.
So we have a motion. Do we have a second? We do have a second. I'm sorry. Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The motion to approve passes. Is there any further business?
No, sir.
That
Thank you,
concludes
Mr.
the
Chairman,
deliberation session. We are adjourned.